What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to the Hawks Film Room podcast. The Atlanta Hawks tonight, their biggest margin of victory, 29 points over the Toronto Raptors. As much as a wire-to-wire victory that we've seen from the Hawks this season, they spent the majority of the game leading. They ended up leading for, I believe, around 40 minutes, so 46 minutes of the game. Um, there were some really interesting things that we can talk about in terms of the way that they defended Toronto and some of the turnover stuff. I also had to go on and bring my guy Abdel. His Twitter, I don't call it X, but his Twitter is at Abdel underscore taco. So how you doing today, bro?
Yeah, you're asking me directly after the game. You already know how I'm doing. But no, I'm doing good, man. Doing good. It's Christmas holidays, winter break time off, so I'm chilling. So
Yes, sir.
I'm
I
good
definitely
outside there.
appreciate you making the sacrifice. After your team went through such a beat down. Uh, but yeah, we'll get straight to it. So I definitely want to highlight Trae Young tonight. Uh, there's been a stretch of games that he's sort of found his rhythm. And against Miami last night, he wasn't able to get to his spots. The shots weren't falling, but he had a great playmaking game. Today, man, I mean, he was on fire. He was hitting some absolutely unreal deep threes. He turned around on one,
Oh,
spun
that one
two
killed me.
around the other one. I mean, he was feeling it. Was super hot. Finished with 10 assists and created 23 points tonight and scored 34. He's one of two players, I think, that are generating 50 points per game. I think Jokic is the only other guy in that category. So when his shot is falling, I think he's a top five offensive player. Some of the volatility stuff, it can keep him out of those consistent conversations. But I really like how he's leaned into the three-point shooting as his biggest offensive weapon, especially with the way that teams shrink the floor against the Hawks. It's been tougher for him to get to the rim. And so as he continues to take these shots off the catch and within rhythm and not forcing them late in the shot clock, I've just really loved what he's done from an offensive perspective, and I have faith that the shooting percentages will continue to look a little bit more like they do tonight than they have in some games past. But what are your thoughts on Trae's performance so far, or at least tonight?
Yeah, it was like destruction of the Raptors. It was like no chance for us to guard him. Like we already undermanned really. It was Ochai, I think, guarding him to begin with. But then they started hunting Grady, and then it was just like free meals for him, right? Outside that, like, yeah, I could tell by like the second or third three he hit, like it was gonna be that kind of night. I think the one where he like high-fived the Hawks fan after he hit it, and
Oh,
then
yeah,
he hit the
yeah,
turnaround right after. I'm like, okay, yeah, he's gonna cook us. But he was even hitting shit like, sorry, I
yeah.
do. I don't know if you curse on here. He's even hitting stuff like he drove. I forgot who it was, and hit like a step back midi, which he doesn't really do pull up mid range jump shots, right? He was even hitting that. So yeah, I always felt like Trae is one of those guys like. He really stressed. Like when I watch the Raptors, superstars go against the Raptors. I always have kind of like certain guys give me like a lot of fear. They really stress the defense, right? To absolutely. That's what Trey does. Like he drives, he like waits for the last moment, lobs to Capella, or he skips it, or he hits a three, right? So yeah, it was just like completely outclassed, the clear the best player on the floor. It was like just like Trey doing superstar stuff, right? So yeah, it was a great
For sure.
performance.
And do you have any Raptors that you would highlight from tonight?
That's can I do no? I'm joking. I would say probably Bruce Brown because it's first game back, and we kind of are missing that sort of guy who can defend out on the perimeter, hit some shots, energy. Like Ochai's done a really good job actually in that role, but just having more bodies to fill that, and he was like very energetic. He was like hitting his floaters. He was getting out in transition, defending really well, especially in that first half. So yeah, that's good, especially coming back from a knee injury, right? Like you never know how you're gonna respond, be lethargic. So he felt like one of the guys who had the most energy on the court, surprisingly. So yeah, I was really satisfied with Bruce Brown and his like approach today. So I would go with Bruce.
Yeah, for sure. I think that's great for you guys as well. I know he's probably someone that you're going to be dangling for some trade bait. Hopefully,
Yeah,
with
for
them
sure, for sure.
some guys who are looking for a contending or a piece to add to a contender. I'm going to have to give my Raptors shout out to Jakob Pertl. Not a super flashy box score, but I saw a
Yeah.
stat on the timeline today was over the last two seasons, the Raptors are 4-33 with when Jakob's out the lineup with a minus 13 point
Oh,
differential. and they're 28 and 48 with him, which isn't a huge improvement, but also differential wise, it's a minus 2.9. And so I think he really gives you guys a floor, and I think he's
Yeah.
a good example of like the value of competent center play, and especially when you have such an aggressive defensive scheme where you have guys, really talented athletes on the perimeter who sometimes gamble. I think he cleans up a lot of those mistakes really well. He gave Trae problems, I think, at the rim. Anytime he goes up against, like, he's really a behemoth, right? So he can take up a lot of space, but he has good positioning, so he can play between the two
Yes.
guys, whether in pick and roll. And so, I thought he did a good job of shutting down the rim when he was out there. And I do think, I know there's some pushback from Raptors fans because of the price that you paid to re-up, and then of course I think traded first, and then ended up moving on from OG and Siakam, so it didn't feel like a move that made sense. And I think it's just kind of tough because you do need a little bit of competency while you're trying to build an identity for a rebuilding team. Like
100%. Yeah.
you can't just run out young guys. I didn't think it was a crazy price, and I think he is like a pretty solid center. But I do understand some of the pushback from you guys. But at the end of the
Yeah.
day, I'm pretty much impressed with him every time I watch, and I do think like, okay, what would a guy like Jakob do for a team like the Hawks, or even like a team that really
Yeah.
needs just competent, consistent center play? And so I think it's a
Yeah.
luxury that a lot of teams honestly don't have.
Yeah. No, 100%. I agree with you completely. Like, the thing about Jakob, like the Jakob the player, I really love the player. Like the even when we drafted him before we traded him for Kawhi, like he his like kind of like coordination as a big. He has
Mhm.
soft hands. He can move his feet. That
Very
was the first
confident.
thing that stood out to me. And he has a crazy for a guy who shoots so bad at the free throw line. His touch on that push shot is actually really good, and like
Mhm.
allows you to play pick and roll. Like a lot of our point guards like Davion and Shed have played really well this year because they've got to share the floor with Jakob, right? And all you have to do is just hit a pocket pass, and he can kind of take care of the rest. A lot of bigs you have to feed them right at the rim.
Yeah.
You can feed him a bit outside, right? And he can work his way in. Going back on the price, like yeah, like trading for Jakob as like an idea itself, like I love the player. I would love to have traded for him like again before we
Mhm.
traded for him, but it was just like the timing, like that 2023 trade deadline, like low key is gonna define it. Like when we look at the next 4 or 5 years as the Raptors, like
Mhm.
their rebuild, that 2023 deadline is like a big data point because like if it was more opportunity cost, like we gave up like a top 10 pick, which is like, okay, you can say, okay, yeah, Jakob's a competent starter center, a top 10 pick, like, okay, it's not the end of the world, right? And I forgot who that pick was. It wasn't like anything special. It might have been Matas, I think. But yeah, I forgot who that pick was. But the thing was that year, it was the Jakob pick and holding on to Fred and losing him for nothing when
Mhm.
we could have traded Jakob, potentially traded Fred, tanked for Wemby. Like that was the big thing. A chance at Wemby, I would like thrown it all away, right? And like even if we didn't get Wemby, like there's still guys in that draft who are good. So like that was the biggest gripe, and it kind of gave us that year last year where we weren't really tanking, we weren't really like chasing the play-in, we were in a weird no man's land because we didn't have our pick. So it kind of like really shifted things back to a year or two. So if you talk to a lot of Raptor fans, they probably have gripes from that aspect, like same as me. But Jakob, the player, has always been very good, like competent. Like as you said, floor raiser. He can help you so much offensively and defensively. As a hub and as a rim protector too. So
Yeah, and I definitely will have some questions a little bit later on about what he does for the offense, and what that means for like a more. I think the word I've been using is like egalitarian sort of offense, and I think that's what the Raptors are ultimately building towards. But I wanted to ask, just from your perspective, like outside of Trey, were there any other Hawks who stood out tonight?
yeah, biggest one is DeAndre Hunter, man. Oh
Yeah,
my
he's
God.
hooping, bro. He's
This
hooping.
guy is I was like, bro, I'm watching Kawhi. He was hitting some like crazy shots. And I was looking at his numbers today before the game. His jump shot, just in general, pull-ups, threes, everywhere. He's just money like this season. Like he's hitting everything, right? So he
Mhm.
continued that today. Off the bench, having someone like that, where he's basically like primary creator off the bench, is very, very good. And he's still pretty solid on defense. Going in, like when he got drafted, everything people thought he was gonna be like a OG level defensive stopper when he reach those heights, but he's still competent, right? He's pretty solid. And he can really his pull-up mid-range jumper, is just money. So he really stood out to me tonight. Like especially in that, I think it was second or third, we're making a little bit of a run, and he had like two, three jumpers in a row. and really push it back to 10, like yeah, I would say Hunter really stood out outside Trae.
Yeah, 22 minutes tonight, scored 22 points. He has the most 20-plus point games off the bench this season. He's one of, I think, 8 or 9 players in NBA history to average 20 off the bench right now. And he's also increased his scoring by 5+ points per game while increasing his true shooting percentage, his relative true shooting percentage by 6. And so it's so tough to increase your efficiency and your productivity in the same season, in your age 27 season as well. And so I think there's a great lesson there about just like giving him a guy who can defend so he doesn't have to exert all that energy on that end. But I'm honestly like I've run out of ways to compliment him in terms of just like what he's doing for this Hawks team, because it's honestly getting remarkable at this point. And I think as the Hawks continue to win, hopefully he can get that case for Sixth Man of the Year. But I want to transition a bit and talk about some of what we saw from the turnovers. So tonight, and also coming into this game, like you guys have had a bit of an issue with turnovers. I think they're 25th in turnover percentage. Tonight, the Hawks tied the records for the most steals in the quarter, which it was this incredibly goofy sequence to start the game. Hawks turned the ball over, missed a shot. Then the Raptors threw the ball down the court. They turned the ball over, and then the Hawks came back and turned the ball over. I think at some point you guys had 8 or 7 turnovers with no shot attempts to start the game.
Yeah, I will say that. That was nuts. Yeah,
which was ridiculous. And I do think there is some credit due to the Hawks defense and their ability to jump in the passing lanes, but it was the second most turnovers in franchise history from you guys. But like I said, I think this is a team that's this, for example, this is really nice hands from Jalen Johnson on Scottie Barnes as he dribbles. A lot of these were also just kind of just shaky ball handling from you guys, or some passes that weren't exactly thought through. And I thought, you have to capitalize that when you're playing a younger team.
Just getting poked away. It's just
it was hard to watch this. Even as the beneficiary, I was like, this is
yeah, it was rough.
Mind you, there still has not been a basket scored. I think this is the first bucket right here from Reza Shea.
Yeah, that was the first one. Yeah, that broke it. That was That start of the game was like, okay, I knew because coming off that Memphis loss, I was like, all right, are they gonna come out firing? And then that's legit the exact opposite, right? And a lot of the turnovers were, like you said, like we were barely in half court for some of them. We were just like chucking it, in transition, and like, it was a lot of careless turnovers to start. But I feel like as the game went on, you started to see more turnovers being forced by the Hawks, right? Like deflections and all that stuff. So I definitely noticed that as we went over, like outside this opening possessions,
Yeah, definitely. Now the Hawks are second or third in the league in deflections. They don't have the leader in steals and deflections per game, Dyson Daniels. But I do want to ask you just something in general, because this is something that I've seen Hawks fans complain about. When you commit to making quick decisions, right, and that's off of rebounds, it's pushing off of makes. I think sometimes guys get so caught up with like thinking or making a quick action that they're not actually thinking about what they're doing.
Yeah.
And so I think there's going to be some growing pains, and like inevitably for you guys, just like it is for the Hawks too. Like we're asking guys who haven't been these super cerebral playmakers, or like haven't always had the ball in their hands, to make these decisions like on the fly. It's not always going to be good. But do you think, like, just in general, some of the shakiness, or like the some of that passing a little bit like that's off schedule or off target, is it because they're trying to play faster, or do you think it's just like they're trying to get those kinks out as young players?
I think a lot of it is because the way the Raptors play, I think they're like top 5 in passes made. Like their system is very like big up top, elbows, horns, like passing it right off cuts and movement. So they're always the more passes you have in your system, you're always prone to more turnover. So there's always like a high like level of turnovers that are going to be for the Raptors generally. But I feel like a lot of the turnovers also is just like you said, like it's guys trying to think too fast or do stuff like that, but also can be spacing related, where like guys are trying to cut through, they're making the correct cut, and in a perfectly spaced system, they'd be wide open and then force like space to open, where in our system, we don't have that much shooters, like nobody really moves, and they're still trying to make the pass, right? That's like not there. Um, because I feel like Scottie and Grady are really good high field players. So I don't really expect them to have turnovers or make these mistakes consistently. But then you'll have guys in the system like I like him a lot, Boucher, but Boucher is like the most low field player I've seen in my life.
Yeah,
But like
right.
trying to put him in positions early on in the season. We had him in like the big facilitator role, which was a disaster, and then we switched him to be more of a, like a forward wing, and he's played
Mhm.
better then. But like this play right here, exactly like this is just decision making, like
Right.
all on the player, right? Like nothing
Mhm.
system related. Like all he has to
Mhm.
do is either just pass early to Grady or just give it to Jacoby on his right, and he tries to go Magic Johnson, right, and just to go for the crazy bounce pass. So yeah, I would say it's a lot of this. The system is prone to high turnovers,
Mhm.
and we don't really have. We're building better. Like I feel like Scottie, Grady, Mogbo, Pirtle, Jacoby. They're all like I think have good enough feel to play this system. Ochai's role is a really good cutter. So I wouldn't expect this to continue. I think it's a lot of spacing and just like dumb mistakes that are happening, and like when you make a bunch of turnovers in a game, I feel like you're prone to more because you're just like, okay, overthinking, like, oh man, I don't want it to get deflected. I don't. So,
Yeah.
I think OKC rolled up in town like a few weeks ago and just like destroyed us just because they're like deflection monsters, right? I feel like these type of teams are really kind of our kryptonite right now, who are like rotate fast and do all that stuff. Where if we play a more conservative team, we can kind of like ping the ball around and get comfortable. These teams
Right.
are just like on you. That's when it's like gets shaky because you're trying to make all these passes in a possession with a bunch of guys swarming around, right? So
Mhm.
I feel like that's why. But if we stick with Darko and his system and we get better players, I don't feel like it'll continue. But it'll always be a higher turnover system than a standard, less
Mhm.
passing, offensive system. That's what I would say.
And I think there was when I spoke to Quinn, or I didn't ask this question. He said something along the lines of um, passing up open shots leads to turnovers. And I think that's also just sort of an issue that teams with bad spacing have because if you
Yeah.
don't have guys who are confident in knocking down shots, then that ultimately results in turnovers. And that's something I've seen constantly from the Hawks this season. Um, we are playing guys who are a little bit outside of Trae. Like when you look at our starting lineup, you don't have anyone who is going to have a ton of gravity as a 3-point shooter.
Yeah.
And so I think that's another reason why we've seen Trae increase his 3-point volume this year. And what's been a welcome development from him is that he's hunting these in transition. And I've talked about this a little bit on the pod before, but it gives him a higher shot quality, but it also gives the Hawks a better chance of getting an offensive rebound. Even though the Raptors are set here, typically if you take a three in transition, the other team isn't set. And
Yeah.
so tonight we doubled you guys on 3-point rate. I think the Hawks were at about 47.4%. And then you guys were around 25%. And you guys take the second lowest amount of threes in the league. So
Yeah.
that's not necessarily like a nod to the Hawks volume. It's just more so like you guys
Shell
don't
the
take a ton of
Raptors. Or yeah.
right. So, but we have had a history of getting completely outclassed on the 3-point line. And so one thing I
Mm.
wanted to find that's pretty interesting about this matchup is that the Raptors are first in paint points and we're second. And
Hmm.
so I think we went to halftime with a 10-point margin after the Boucher three, which was ridiculous, by the way.
Yeah, that was
But
nuts.
they hit that three, and then it was a 10-point margin. You guys were ahead at like 18 or 20 points in the paint.
Hmm.
And then by the end of the game, the Hawks finished with about 2 or 4 more points in the paint. And a lot of that, I think, were the type of steals that they were getting. They were getting out in transition, easy buckets,
Yeah.
ended up outscoring you guys 30-10 in fast break points, which was definitely a big factor. Um,
Yeah.
but I think they were able to, again, first off, the Hawks are pretty good at limiting points in the paint in general. I thought that Scottie was doing a good job probing, and you guys have the athletes to get down in there.
Yeah.
Um, but their ability to sort of generate these 3-point shots at a higher rate than the Raptors is what kept them like with that lead before they're able to start like breaking down from the inside. So I guess like from the Hawks perspective, they're typically like an inside out team, even if they do employ these higher volume 3-point shooters and like DeAndre Hunter. And their play style kind of shifts like they want to get away from the starters because Trae
Hmm.
comes in. Trae starts off with these roll threats, these short roll guys. Jalen's going to get guys in the short roll. He's going to spray out from there if it's available, but they're not necessarily hunting threes with the starting lineup.
Yeah.
But against a team like Toronto, it's more advantageous to try and take more than them just because they can't match that volume by any
Yeah.
means. So I think that was definitely the game plan for tonight. Trae was firing, and when
Yeah.
he starts off hitting three threes, and the other thing is too, like he's switching up how he's getting these deeper threes. Like a lot of times these were deep three step backs in the shot clock off the dribble. He's taking more of them, one dribble or off the catch, and I think that's helped
Yeah.
him be a little more consistent. So I just want to ask, like, when you think about 3-point volume, I guess, like, for a team with limited, I guess, shooters outside of, maybe someone like Grady Dick, who's a younger guy, what have you liked from the offensive process in terms of getting into the paint? And, like, what do you think it takes? Like, because one thing we're trying to figure out, I think for the Hawks at least, is how do you establish consistency without results? Or like
Hmm.
because Reza Shea and Dyson, like they have wavering confidence, but their confidence is really tied to whether we're going to be able to create good offense with the starters. Because if teams can sag off of them, it
Yeah.
becomes a lot deeper. Like these types of looks are not what you want to see Trae getting. And this is with good shooters
Yeah.
on the floor. But this is just how aggressive the Raptors are. But like this is how teams play Reza Shea and Dyson. So
Hmm.
two questions. What do you think about their offensive process to try and make up for that gap? And then secondly, like how do you build consistency in general as
Hmm.
like a younger player?
Yeah, I feel like the Raptors offense in general, I enjoy it in terms of approach, right? Because to be honest, like I feel like us and like a couple other teams, I would say Warriors, the same similar type of offense where it's
Mhm.
very big related, and you're passing out using your bigs, and then reliant on cuts, right, and finishing high-low
Right.
actions and like stuff like that, right? So I feel like a lot of the paint points we get are through like backdoor, like 45 cuts or high-low actions, like Yaka feeding Scottie or vice versa. So like I think I like the offense in general, Darko's offense. But obviously, like right now, I think I don't even know what rank we are, but we're probably like 15 to 20 or 15 to 25 in that range, probably. Um, the Raptors offense. So I would say our low 3-point volume doesn't bother me too much because I feel like as we get more 3-point shooters, like for example, right, if we run, if we have an offensive possession and we move it around and like the ball gets swung to Ochai above the break and he has like a certain, like decent amount of space, he's a corner specialist, right? So he's not the type of shooter who will just like launch that immediately, right? He'll pump
Mhm.
fake, drive, and keep it moving. I feel like there's a lot of passed up threes that would become actual threes in the future
Mhm.
with more aggressive shooters, right? Like Grady playing in those positions. So I feel like just with better players, the 3-point volume will scale up. But I enjoy the focus on getting the ball into the paint and using our bigs to pass, you know. So I would say I'm a fan of it. And then your second question was about the process, right? Building consistent process.
Yeah, building consistency. Yeah.
Yeah. It's always hard, man, because sports in general is results oriented, right? Like you can preach all you want, and at the end of the day, like today, like for example, 10th loss in a row, right? When you go to the locker room, are you gonna be like, hey guys, like let's just keep doing the same things we've been doing? Like as a player, you're gonna be like, man, like we're trying to do the same things we're doing, and we're getting whooped, right? So like
Mhm.
it's like then they're gonna start doing stuff at like 50% effort, right? And then like system in a system like this where it's predicated on ball movements and cutting, everything has to be done with intent, right? So if you have a system like this and you have a guys with morale drop and they start not playing as well, then they're not believing in the system and it's like a vicious cycle. Then the system becomes less potent and then it gets worse and worse, right? So I would say it's hard to do it, but build consistency. But you just have to keep like it's like any skill in life. You just have to keep doing it and then until it becomes second nature, you know. And then like when you're not thinking about like any of this, you're just like running the offense and so on. And then as you get better players, it just becomes better and better, right? So I would say there's not really an answer to just build consistency. You just have to hope you hold on enough
Mhm.
till you get good results, right? Or so you don't have to get like you don't have to win like 10 in a row. Just like a win here and a win there, just to keep the morale up, right? So I would say you just kind of have to hang on, you know, until things get decent, and then you can really keep preaching your approach, and then you start to like build on that, right? So the number one thing I would avoid is ditching the system or ditching the approach because like even if it never works out, the system or however we're trying to build, like ripping it up halfway just makes things way worse. You know, like you have to start new from scratch again, and it's a whole thing, right? So I would say you got to see it out to the end, you know, until you're absolutely sure it's not working, right? So yeah, that's what I would say.
No, it definitely makes sense. And I thought one thing that stood out to me just in general about what you said is like committing to a process that, at least generally makes sense. Like you can see some sort of value in it. And I think like a good example of that is seeing guys who that's not necessarily like, for example, the Hawks are trying to do something similar, not as big reliant in terms of the playmaking, but making quick decisions and playing well
Hmm.
off of one another. And Garrison Matthews was making some passes I've never seen him make in his career.
Yeah.
Some of that was get passes. He has never been that type of guy to really drive and create pressure on the defense. But watch him come off this handoff here with Onyeka. He's throwing this here.
Yeah.
And
Real early.
this is really early, and this is really impressive from a guy who's been just a shooter his entire career. And I think you only
Yeah.
get this by making mistakes. You only get it by committing to a style of play. And so
Yeah.
even I also want to point out one other thing. One thing that I've just loved about like the Quinn Snyder experience is like the weak side actions as well, trying to keep defenders engaged. So you see Jalen's going to set this pin down
Hmm.
as
Yeah.
Garrison's coming down. So in case this isn't open, then they can look for on the weak side. They can kick it out that way. So
Yeah.
I
Multiple
think
options.
the multiple options, but giving guys the and empowering them to be, you know, obviously we're not trying to lose games, so we can't have you just smoking or like throwing the ball away.
Yeah.
But when there's space for guys to create and where there's space for them to be, sort of experimental with what they're doing, especially the younger guys, I think that Quinn has done a really good job with that. And
Yeah.
I've had my frustrations with Garrison. He can be really frustrating as a player when he's not hitting his shots, but if he can do stuff like this more consistently and move the ball, then I think that's a tribute to what they're building with the system, but
Hmm.
also just gives us a better baseline because we have guys like Bogey who can be hurt from time to time. DeAndre Hunter's been hurt from time to time, so having a guy like that
Yeah.
who can step in, high power 3-point shooter, but it's a little bit more than that. Kind of reminds me of like what Duncan Robinson does for
I was
Miami.
about to say, like, yeah.
What great can do too in the future.
Yeah, like the passes he was making and like the way he was like coming off screens and like really putting pressure on defense reminded me of like that when Duncan started to pop, like the
Mm.
stuff he started to add to his game, it wasn't just like oh movement shooting. It was like that relationship he had with Bam, right? Where he was just like
Yep.
damming him up, right? Every
Little two
single
man.
time, right? There's automatic, right? So yeah, him and Onyeka, I felt like they're like on that same wavelength tonight, right? So yeah, definitely he stood out. Like on the Hawks highlight, he was probably like right next after Hunter or Jalen Johnson I was gonna mention. Also Vít Krejci. That guy's something about that guy I really like. The way he moves, I don't know, it's just
Yeah,
he
he
moves
has a
really well.
flash. He has a really like nice flash to his game, but it's a
Yeah.
functional flash. Like he's not going to if you watch someone like I guess like a Brandon Boston, like they're gonna do like a lot of hezzy tween stuff, but he has a
Hmm.
okay, I'm gonna run off the catch, flash the ball here, but I'm gonna bring it to my left and finish over here. So I
Yeah.
love when he does stuff like that. But I also wanted to ask you just like where do you stand on the Jalen and Scottie debates? I don't know who started. I don't know if it was y'all, if it was us. But it's kind of been a bit of a little bit of a war between Raptors and Hawks fans about their guy from that draft. And so in general, like
Yeah.
what do you think on that?
No, it's interesting because that draft class is always fun to debate, right? Because like there's so many guys, especially similar types of positions, right? So you have like Jalen, Scotty, Kuminga, Franz, like all these guys are like very talented forwards, right? Giddy as well in that range, right? So it's always fun to debate. The thing I'll say about Jalen, like athletically, he just clears Scotty for me. That's what his like biggest strength is to me. They have similar games, but I feel
Mhm.
like JJJ is like transition monster. Like he is like an crazy transition player. He's like a 20 and 10 big man who can pass, right?
Yeah.
That type of thing. Like if he was in like the 2005 era, he would be averaging like 20 and 10, like Stoudemire type. You know what I mean? That that's
Yeah.
that's the kind of thing. But also he can like handle and pass on top of that. That's why I feel like. Whereas Scotty, I feel like he's more of a handler, ball handler, point forward. He works like kind of in the in between areas. Like I feel like JJJ can hit spot up threes, create like really attack the rim, dunk. He has a decent like nice runner. But like that middle area, I feel like Scotty more focuses more on there, whereas JJ focuses more on like transition and like getting to the rack, and he's like a better higher twitch athlete, right? So I would say as prospects, uh, Jalen really improved. Like I would have said, like if you asked me a year ago, I'm like, what are you talking about, Jalen comparing to Scotty, right? Like don't like you go talk to Kuminga, right? Like I would have said stuff like that to you, but now he really put himself in that tier. Like I consider
Mhm.
him in that tier. I'm biased. I would prefer Scottie because the thing about Scottie is I feel like there's not many better feel and processors at his size in the league. Like his sense of like space timing and how to pass, also his handle for his size is like really impressive. And I feel like both of them would thrive in a more secondary role. Like
Yeah,
ideally on a championship team, they would be in a more secondary role.
yeah,
I just feel like Scotty would, like in a playoff scenario, even though Jalen's probably a better spot up shooter, would have more stuff to his game in terms of getting the ball in the middle of the floor, pulling up floaters and punishing mismatches in a post, you know. But they're very close to me. It just kind of depends on what you want. But I'm gonna go Scott, obviously. But Jalen's improvement last 2 years has been kind of crazy, you know. So that's what I'll say.
I like that distinction you made in terms of, I guess, their overall sort of archetype. And
Yeah.
Jalen, for example, he's been the role man on about 1.8 possessions per game. You look at Scotty, he's only rolling. He doesn't even have like any data on the rolling because that's not
Yeah.
what he has. And so I think that when you do have someone like Quickly, you can experiment with him more as a screener. I think when I think about Sky, I just think about like a do it all, go gadget, like go do everything for us. And I
Yeah.
feel like he can do at least be competent in most things. Obviously, like a huge asset defensively. I love his size. I love the way he has his feel and to give guys because I do think if this is your first time watching the Raptors and you see him throw the ball off Jakob Poeltl's head and the eight, you might be like, what is Abdel talking about with in terms of the
Yeah.
field?
Yeah.
But just to compare them as passers. Now, to be fair, Scotty's on the ball more than
Yeah. For sure.
Jalen. So like Jalen's on the ball about 20% of the time. Scotty's at 33%, but he's averaging 24 assist points per 100, 20 potential assists, um, 10.2 assists per 100 possessions, and then he's generating 4.5 assists at the rim and 4 from the 3-point line. And then Jalen is at 16.3 assist points, about around 7 assists per 100. And then he's generating 3.2 rim assists and 2.4 3-point assists. So there is a decent sized gap there in terms of where Scotty is running the offense for Toronto. And then, of course, Jalen is playing off of Trae Young.
Hmm.
They
Yeah.
actually are averaging the same amount of potential assists per 1 minute on ball, which I think is pretty interesting. So
Yeah.
for the amount of time he's on the ball, Jalen is matching the playmaking of Scotty. But again, like that's the caveat of better offensive infrastructure, having the benefit of playing off of Trey. So
Yeah.
I do think that they're in that tier. I think Franz was separating himself from them a little bit with the way that he
Yeah.
was created for Orlando again in a pretty tough offensive
I
infrastructure.
think,
But
yeah,
go
I
ahead.
think Franz is just he's that guy, man. Like I feel like every time they like people say about 2021 redraft, there's only two guys where they say that are better than Scotty. I'm like, okay, I should put my hands up. Is Mobley and Franz. Like those two guys, I feel like are just like they can just do so much at a impact efficient high level, right?
Yeah,
So those two guys, yeah, I would say like probably like my top two in the draft. Then you have yeah the other group I would put like K, JJJ, and the rest of them in that group right after. It's probably Franz probably like he can float in between. Like I'm not saying he's like oh yeah, we're not touching Franz, but I just rate him that highly where I'm like okay yeah like he's something special. But yeah, it's that 21 draft has a lot of good forwards. A lot of good
yeah.
forwards.
So I know you mentioned this particular clip because you were saying that you feel like this has become sort of Scotty's go-to in that in-between area where he can
Yeah,
use his
like
size, his length.
the I think I checked and I think he was shooting like 50% on dribble two-pointers last time I checked, which
Mhm.
is really good. Like the thing about Scotty is like year one he had a really good hook shot, push shot floater game because he was coming off cuts and like switches. He was playing really like the fourth option on offense, right? And every time we get in the paint, it was like an automatic hook over the top, right? And it was a really big feature of his game that I liked. And like he kind of strayed away from that as he's tried to like develop his three-pointer more. Last year he had like a pretty good three-point leap, but this year he's shooting probably similar volume. He's chucking a lot of threes, but he's like 27%. He's not hitting anything, right? But the last like I would say like probably like week or two, he's really started to take more of these jump shots and like the type of player Scotty is, he's like even as a prospect, when we were looking at who we're gonna draft when we had the fourth pick, A lot of people wanted Suggs, same as me, over Scottie, right? And one of the reasons why I had big concerns about Scottie in terms of his bursts, like he's not a bursty guy, like when he's stationary, like he doesn't really have that quick burst or anything. Like the thing that he's like really good at and he survived is like he's really strong. He's kind of like if you were to compare him and Pascal, Pascal is more like he'll slice through, right, and slither
Mhm.
through a defense. Scotty kind of just like batters his way until he's in a certain amount of area, and then he can use his touch, right? And his touch is like really good, especially from the mid-range area. So plays like this where like he can bump a lot of guys, and I think I this might have been on Jalen Johnson, who's really strong as well.
Mhm.
I don't know who he drove this on, but
This was on yeah.
yeah, so like you can see that bump is enough to push even Jalen Johnson, who's crazy strong, enough to get that shot off, and nobody's contesting his mid-range jumper, right? So in terms of like we give Scotty the ball, we need him to score. There's times where he kind of dilly-dallies, he freestyles. He's like, "Am I gonna drive? Am I?" Last second, he'll choose because he has such good feel. He'll be like, oh, "Okay, let me." And it leads to scenarios where he kind of looks like yeah, crazy plays where he's like, "Okay, he just threw the ball out for no reason." But in
Right.
terms of like, I'll get the ball. A lot of stars, you give them the ball, they have one or two moves they're gonna go to. You counter those moves, okay, then they'll play off that, right? Like immediately, right? Like it feels like Scotty has like all these options he could do, and he overthinks. So having a like play where you can just drive, bump, and pull up, or if like they take the bump, he can like go into post up, spin, hook shot, or something like that. I feel like that's gonna really help him like make because he kind of needs consistency in terms of moves on offense to go to. This is just strictly one-on-one scoring, right? Without a screen or anything. That's kind of
Mhm.
what he needs to work on. So him flashing this is pretty encouraging, I would say.
I really like the distinction you made between um, the different types of, I guess, strength that a player can show in terms of their interior finishing. Because one thing that I feel like we're always asking Jalen to do is to use his strength a little bit more, use that size. And
Yeah.
here he has a miss. Again, Bruce Brown is no, he's not a mouse. You know what I'm saying? He's not a mouse in
Yeah.
the house. Strong dude. But I feel like sometimes too often Jalen's going horizontal in these
Yeah.
scenarios. And he's
Yeah.
not this isn't advantageous for him. And
Yeah.
then he's releasing the ball pretty low again for his size against a smaller defender. So it's like I
Yeah.
want to see him, use that pound dribble. Let's get close. Let's go to the back shot. Let's go to a fade. Let's spin closer to the basket instead of going horizontal. And I
Yes.
think
Yeah.
just in general, like when we talk about Franz or Scotty, both of those guys are better self creators than Jalen at this point. Both of those guys are better half court scorers, and
Yeah.
that's ultimately what's going to decide his ceiling. Like, if he's going to be a number two, then he has to be able to create for himself, and he can in some scenarios, like, but he's still at his best in transition or in the short roll playing off of
Yeah.
Trae, and it's the growth in these areas. Like against the Miami game, he was able to take a hero to the rack out of this with his back, with his shoulder, with his back to the basket. Um, he was really good in terms of his turnaround shooting last season. He's pretty good this season as well. But I want to see him just embrace the physicality, and I do think if you also think about like their archetypes, I guess, or like the way their body's composed. Like Scotty's a thicker guy. Like he may
Yeah.
be, I'm not sure what the weights are at. We know that Jalen's more bursty, but in terms of like moving people, I actually don't think he's on that same level. And so I think you don't want to take away from the open court, brilliance that he is in terms of bulking up. But I do think he
Hmm.
needs to get a little bit stronger in his base because I see guys able to move him off his spot simply by pushing the back or like having an arm bar, and now he's
Yeah.
moving away from him as opposed to towards it. So the great thing is that he still has so much more room to grow, and this is something I've been talking about like all season. This kid is averaging 20, 10, 5, 1 and 1. There's
Yeah.
every player who's ever averaged that was an
I saw
all-star that
that.
season.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's like and this is him still raw as an actual creator for himself. And so I
Yeah.
think that's really the amazing thing. And I try not to get caught up with like comparisons because I think they're on different developmental timelines. Like Franz and Scotty have been playing consistently since their rookie years.
That's
Nate
true.
McMillan
Yeah.
took away
That's a good
the
point.
first two, right?
Yeah.
And he also didn't get a ton of time at Duke as well. So I think just in general, I'm just so pleased with what he's become so far, and I think that there's still so much more for him to grow into. So I don't want to cap where he
Yeah.
can be, but I do think as of right now, I'm more confident that Scotty or Franz can be that number two guy or some other like younger wings in his category than I do Jalen. But he's still
Yeah.
such an asset in the short role as a screener
Exactly.
and then defensively with some of the weak side stuff that I'm so confident that he will be at least like a number 3 or like a guy who can really impact winning.
Yeah, for
So
sure. Like I
supercharged.
think yeah, I think he has a lot of similarities to Simmons, right? In terms of like these guys were both transition like crazy in transition. When the game slowed down, it was kind of a bit more clunky. I feel like he has a way better touch than Simmons, and obviously he doesn't have that weird "I'm scared to shoot," right? So there's more there, but like that clip you're showing, yeah, like I think because yeah, I think he's tall. I think he's like legit 6'10". He's taller than Scott. Scott is like 6'7", 6'8". He just has long arms. But yeah, maybe just him pounding in the post might not be his path. Maybe he can catch the ball face up and use his quickness going
Mhm.
forward or stuff like that. But yeah, like developing that area because I was looking on. I think I saw somewhere where he took like 50 to 60 runners this year already, like floater shots, and he
Mhm.
shot pretty well on them. I think a lot of those were because like the way he drives, a lot of the time he drives, he bumps and then he pulls it back and then he'll go for a floater, right? And I think they count those as runners. But yeah, like if he can have some sort of uh mid-range post, mid-post or low post presence, then that's gonna really give him a baseline. Like the thing you like to have your stars is like, okay, everything's going wrong, they still have this, they can go to, you know what I mean? There's not that much
Yep.
transition, they still have this, right? So yeah, him developing that, I feel like he has a lot of tools to get there, especially how he's because in Duke he was like his jumper was kind of trash. I'm not even gonna lie. I think it was I don't even think it was like above 30 or something like that. Now
Yeah.
he's just hitting catch and shoot threes, right? So yeah, I feel like he'll get there. But yeah, that's definitely like the area for him to improve for the next star step, right? To get to like the fringe all NBA, that type of conversation,
Yep.
top 25. So
Yep.
yeah.
Definitely agree. So I want to wrap up just asking you some draft stuff. So I remember the first time I interacted with you, I read your Modest Buzelis piece, and I'm like a
Oh
huge Buzelis guy. That was a really good piece on him. So I want to
yeah,
revisit some priors from this class and then ask you about 25. So like for me personally, I'm pretty happy with where I had De Silva. I had him top 15. I had um, had Donovan fourth.
fourth, okay.
But some things that didn't age too well, like I had Jared McCain 22nd. Like obviously
Oh yeah, me too. I had
he's
him in the
been
20s, I think. Yeah.
he would have been rookie of the year,
Yeah.
I think for sure. And then I was pretty high on guys like Isaiah Collier, who just I don't think he's in a good situation.
I had him at 4.
Yeah, so I had
Yeah.
Collier 8. So it's like
Yeah.
but I still think he has it. Like I haven't given up on him. So just sort
Yeah,
of like
it's still
what would be
early.
your like I guess your 2024 draft thoughts? Like who are some guys you've been impressed with? Who are some
Yeah.
guys you think still have a little bit left to contribute?
Yeah, so like yeah, Collier was one of the guys that mentioned. I had him fourth. His offense being this poor is kind of concerning, but I feel like defensively he's looked okay, solid. So there's still some work to work with. Four might have been
Mhm.
too high, but I think it's not a huge miss. He might end up being potential starter rotation player.
Yeah.
We'll see, and maybe top 10 won't be that bad.
Mhm.
Castle, Castle I had at 24.
Oh wow,
Um, and you know why? Castle and Cody Williams, I was really low on, and I think Cody Williams,
that's
like,
a hit though. I
yeah,
had
I
Cody.
think
I had
I'm
him
not gonna
20.
I'm not gonna say it's over for him or anything, but I'm all my concerns, they're
Mhm.
still there. Castle, like the thing is, people were putting Castle top 3, and they were saying he has creative potential, and I 100% disagreed with that. I thought he could be like a Josh Hart, useful rotation starter, maybe starter level wing, right?
Mhm.
And then I put him at 24, probably out of spite, just to like counteract that. He probably should have been around in the late lotto for me, to be honest, maybe around 14. I
Mhm.
still have concerns about him, right, on offense and like his athleticism for his role. I feel like if he was a bit better athlete, his
Mhm.
role as a wing would be a bit more of a sell for me. And the jump shot is obviously concerning, right? But I think I'll probably be wrong on that. I think he's going to be a good, like a winning player, Castle.
Yeah,
Um,
I had him sixth, but I had some of the
6. I
same
remember
concerns.
being high on him. Yeah,
But
high, like or
my
decently
thing
high.
about Castle, I was like, I know this dude can embrace a role. I know he can do it really well. I had Josh Hart and Anthony Black as his shades, like some of the like the plays I
Yeah,
saw in or like the players I saw in him. What's interesting to me is like when he jumps off two, I forget the game. Maybe it was a Knicks game. He has the burst there, like in the open court, like he can get
yeah,
like he has a back scratcher. I'm like, okay, but then you
Off
watch
to
him around
yeah.
the rim, and it's
Yes.
flat. It's like very flat. He's not able to finish above the rim at his size, and
Yeah.
so I definitely get the concern. Like he's right now, he's hurting them offensively.
Yeah,
That's just a truth.
there's guys like that, right? There's a lot of guys like that, especially Scotty's kind of like that too, where in open court he can throw down a windmill no problem, but in like traffic or whatever, he barely gets off the floor. Like it doesn't matter, he's like 6'8", 7'4" wingspan for him, but
Mm.
like for Castle, like when he's driving on someone and he's like that guy is still attached to him and he's going up to finish, he doesn't have a lot of area to jump, so he ends up like not getting as much lift, and he'll get like blocked a
Yeah.
lot. He got blocked a lot in college that way, right? So
Mm.
as a guy who you wanted to be, let's say, one of your top three creators on offense, let's say, right? If you drafted him, however, I think you drafted him six or top five, or might have been drafted in fourth. I don't know what pick San Antonio had.
He was
Um,
full.
the fourth, right? And then if you want him to be like one of your top three creators, that's a big limitation. And then you combine that with the shooting, right? Not being, and he's more of a like a two size
Yeah.
where he can play the three in spurts. So that's yeah, that's still that's what made me lower on him. Putting four was overreaction. I'm not gonna lie, but yeah, that's what I'll say. One guy is like you mentioned earlier, De Silva. I wanted to put him lotto so bad, like 14th, maybe late 15th, right? I ended up him at 18th. That guy is just like he's old, but the size,
Yep.
touch, he could handle the ball. Like people talked
Yep.
about as he was just a wing, but he could handle it. Like today, this
Yep.
game that he's playing
Tom
against
tonight,
Brooklyn,
right?
yeah, he was like playing point guard essentially, or like primary creator, right? So yeah, that guy, yeah, I'm really impressed. Another guy is I had Mogbo 16, so we got him at 30, so I was happy. So I feel like I'm a bit worried still about his offense there, but his defensive potential is pretty good. Where I feel good at 16. Um, Edie, I had 13. I probably should have top 10. That guy's going to be an impactful player. I don't
Yeah.
know about the top three, top five ED cults out there that really love him, but top 10, he's going to be a good impact pick. Risasher had 10th, and he went number one. Uh, but I just think he's going to be a solid wing,
Yeah.
like 10th, like I had I had Kyle Filipowski over him at 9, and then Devin Carter 8. So that was kind of the tier I had with just them three. I
Mhm.
think Filipowski is gonna be good. Like that
Yeah.
guy, yeah, he's very like his skill level for his size is kind of nuts. Like I think people are sleeping on him. Um, so yeah, that's
I saw
kind
him
of
throw a lob to Walker, I think, a couple games ago. Like he's
yeah, I saw
running.
that, right? You saw
I
that clip?
was like, oh,
Yeah.
okay, that's what I've been looking for. So, but yeah,
Yeah,
I'm in.
yeah, man. Yeah, he's impressive. Let's see anything else on here. Yeah, Cody Williams we talked about. AJ Mitchell 21. I wanted to draft him at 19 for the Raps. I think he's
Mm.
gonna be good. He's already impactful on the Thunder, really good team. So AJ Mitchell's really good. Khalil Ware 15. I feel like that's fair. That's around where he got drafted, I think. Um, Dalton Connect 12. He's old though, but he's been good. Um, yeah, and then basically I had Holland 1, Sar 2, Buzelis 3, Collier 4, Shepard 5, Klingon 6, Dillingham 7. And I'm pretty comfortable with that. The thing about Buzelis, he really needs to he needs to find a way to stay on the floor offensively. I really love the defense though, but offensively he has to find a way to stay on the floor because he has so much skill, but him not being able to shoot right now is tough. So he's got to find a way to stay on the floor. But I'm still high on him, man. Still, I think he's gonna be really good. Um, so yeah, that's kind of my thoughts. I don't know if you have any other thoughts on this
No,
class.
I think we definitely had some overlap there. Just
Yeah.
wanted to ask you some 2025 guys you might have your eye on. So, I've been I went to watch Duke play Georgia Tech here in person. I was very impressed with Malawach. I think Conklin as
Mhm.
well. He's gaining a lot of traction for me. And then the Illinois guys, like I'm just really interested in Tommy, the Visage twin. I think he's better than Big Z,
Mhm.
honestly.
Mhm.
And then
Mhm.
even Will Riley and then Kasparis, like I just think they have a really intriguing like group of prospects over there. Like I want if I had to take like if the Hawks could get a big, I want Malawach.
Mhm.
If he's not available, like I think I would consider a guy like Tommy just because as you talk about a little bit with Pirtle, like the ability to have a guy as a hub who also has some offensive upside is such a valuable thing. And the Hawks
Yeah.
don't have like Dyson and Reza Shea may not become those guys offensively, so you may need to inject that at the 5 position. So I've kind of Obviously, I think Malawach has the ability, to run a little bit of handoffs and stuff, but I really liked what I've seen from Tommy. So I think I've been very big focused this cycle, and there's also just not a lot of bigs to watch. So um, those
Yeah.
those guys have me.
I feel yeah, Malawach I gotta watch more. I haven't really sat down and watched him like a game focused on him because most of the Duke games I watch, I've been paying attention to Cooper and Con Knuckle a bit more. Isaiah Evans, Loki's sniper. The one game I watched, he went crazy. I don't know about the other games. It's probably just I caught him on a good game. But yeah, Malawach I gotta watch more. But apparently, a couple of my buddies think he has some shooting potential based on what he previously. So yeah, if he can have some sort of potential, and that guy's huge, right? He's not really that thin either, too. He has some meat on him. Yeah, so I feel like I'll like him. I gotta watch him more. The Thomas Lav, yeah, he's impressive. Like he offensively is really good. Like he's a pick and pop automatic 3-pointer. He has some decent feel. Every time I watch Illinois, I'm impressed with him. The only thing
Yeah.
that concerns me is he's not really a presence defensively in terms of getting blocks. And in college, bigs who don't really get too much blocks, you got to be a really good offensive player to offset that, right? So that's something I'm going to keep an eye on. His brother is kind of the opposite, where
Yep.
he's less skilled offensively, but he's like can protect the rim, and his
Mhm.
jumper is kind of like Thomas Sav's like more stationary jumper, left-handed, which is like cash every time. His brother actually has some movement to him. It's kind of a weird looking jumper, but he can kind of hit it on the move. So I think his brother might have more upside, but I definitely think
Mm.
Thomas Sav's better right now. But they're both interesting, I would say. Outside that, these guys 2025 draft. I always feel like I need to watch more, but I think I've watched enough to have a decent feel. I think Harper, like coming in, I thought Harper was a stud, like coming in, right? And he's just only impressed me more. His drive, he might be like a special driver, like that we like seen in the last like 5 years in terms of how much he gets to the rim, like how consistent he is. He's finishing at the rim, numbers there. The only thing I'll say is there's valid concerns about his okay, what does he do if he can't get to the rim? Right?
Mm.
His pull-up game isn't, he's never really had that good of a pull-up game. He kind of like the comp I always make that kind of makes kind of sense. He's kind of similar to RJ Barrett's approach offensively, where like they're both head down, they can drive to the rim left-handed, and outside that, like no really pull-up game to see, but they can hit stationary 3-pointers. I would say Dylan is a bit more better way like better handle in the pick and roll. He has a bit more to him there. And I think I have more faith in him developing a runner or a pull-up shot than I would have RJ. So that's like a question about okay, his pure upside, like can he really, if he can't get to the rim, like is he what type of variety does he have, right? But like on the Raptors, if you ask me one prospect I would want on the Raptors right now, it would be Harper. Like
Mm.
if you just say, okay, give me one prospect, like obviously I would take Flag. Flag's gonna be really special, but like even in high school, I had questions about Flag. Like the first few times I watched him, I was like, okay, does he normally just take this much pull up mid-range jumpers? Like, is this like I
Mm.
was kind of concerned. I'm like, okay, is he taking this to work on his game, or is he taking this because he's getting cut off and he can't really get to the rim consistently one-on-one? But that guy's floor is crazy. Like, he can just do so much, and like when you're that big, that skilled, and you have a decent touch, like
Yeah.
it's basically like I compared it to um like if you're playing a game or like an RPG and you want to level up and you learn a new skill, like he's already like he has like a 50% boost in leveling up because he already has the frame, the touch, everything, so the time it would take him to add new skills versus the average prospect is like way minimal. So I
Mm.
wouldn't be surprised in like 3-4 years all of a sudden this guy's shooting pull-up threes, he's getting to the rim, like pick and roll ball handling, right? So that's why I probably won't deviate from him as one. But on the Raptors I would take him, but it just kind of reminds me of the Pascal Scottie fit where it was a bit clunky. I think Cooper has potential to smooth it out. That's one of the guys I'm impressed with. Kasparas, I've been like really impressed with in terms of his pull-up jump shooting and his foul drawing. And I think I'm pretty high on him. I think I have him top three, top five, in the last time I ranked the boards. But he's got to show more in terms of if he gets bigger, stronger athletes on him, how does he create good shots outside, just taking a step back three. You know, I feel like in that situation he'd probably run pick and roll, and he could pull up from two well. But there's times where like the best players, they're like just in almost every stage of the game, they're like undeniable. Like you can't, they'll force you to make a mistake, right? I feel like Asparas has stages in his game where it's like he's reliant on you to make a mistake and like going like, okay,
Mm,
like hopefully you'll jump, I could jump into you. If not, I'm kind of screwed, you know? Like there's areas in his game like that where I feel like the athletic jump could catch up to him. So
right.
that's one guy. The guy I like really love, who's probably like my favorite prospect in the draft, is Derek Queen. Like
Mm,
I love Derek Queen, man. Like my impressions for him from Mountain Verde was like a low post big, based on like the little things I watch. This guy is like he could handle. He's like four. He has the skills of a four man, even like a three. Like he could handle on the perimeter, face up attack. He can do so much offensively, and he still has the traditional big man skills of offensive rebounding, posting up. Obviously, defense is a concern.
mm,
I think he has actual like creator upside, but what determines that is how good his touch is going to be, like
mm,
shooting threes or like posting up or like just in general. Like if his touch is like not that good, okay, then it's going to limit him from being like a like offensive force to just being good. And then the defense comes into the equation and you're like, okay, this guy's just good on offense, but he's killing us on defense. Then you can like okay, but I don't think he'll kill you on defense. I think he's going to be like one of those players who like has good hands, smart. He'll get smoked once in a while, but he'll do enough to keep things afloat. That's kind of like the four guys like at the top. I've really watched. Just some guys in the lottery I'm interested in as well, but I'm kind of building out um as more guys I watch. So yeah, that's kind of my impressions there.
Definitely appreciate those perspectives. For me, it's hard for me to watch college basketball because it's not a good
Yeah,
product, especially in the NBA. Not engaging NBA games, it's hard for me to choose to watch it. So like
yeah,
when I do watch college basketball, it's for a prospect. And
yes,
so
yeah,
I think Queen is someone I need to watch more of. I've seen a lot of Hawks fans talk about him. I understand the offensive upside. I'm just concerned about the size, the ability to defend. I've seen good clips. I've seen good process from him.
yeah,
I'm not saying he can't get there, but for a team that's trying to build a defensive identity and they have successfully done that this season, I think you have to find that. Like, is he going to be a Nas Reed type dude? Offensively, that'd be pretty good for the Hawks, but I don't think that works for us defensively. Like, he has to be a
yeah.
step above that. He
I
has
feel
to
like
be
you have to have
like a
like
shooting type contest, like
yeah,
competitor. I think.
you gotta have like the center there. You know what I mean? To pair with Queen, um, to
Mm,
really like or like the four man whatever whoever big man pairing he's with is gonna really determine. I feel like his impact and development. You know. So yeah, it's on the Hawks. It's kind of yeah, it's kind of tough. Um, yeah, I think of it right. But yeah, no, he's an interesting prospect though. Like yeah, like guys like that who've played one way as opposed to big, and then all of a sudden role change completely and they're just
mm.
like good at what they do. That's those guys kind of interest me. It's like okay, you can kind of play in different areas. Um, one guy like I don't know if you watch any VJ or Igor. Those are the two other
I've
guys.
seen, yeah, I like Igor a
Yeah,
lot, but I'm not.
yeah. I like Igor too. I just feel like he just does so much at his size. VJ is interesting, man. He's like crazy explosive, but he can't do anything. Like he can't even drive like
Yeah, it's bad.
correctly, you know? Like
Mm,
he's like his handle and his strength is so bad where like he drives, he always gets bumped. Like
mm,
so he has so much off athletic potential and he can't utilize it outside being a help guy on defense. That's where his athleticism pops, right? On
mm.
offense, it doesn't really pop that much. So he's interesting. I don't know how we're gonna rank him because there's so much stuff I like, but I don't know about the offensive upside, man. Like there's so much missing, right, at this point. So yeah, he's gonna be an interesting case, I would say. You know?
Well, for sure, bro. I definitely appreciate you taking the time. It was a great convo. Love talking
Yeah,
draft prospects in general, especially because I haven't been tapped in as much as I wanted to be with this 25 class. So it's a little synopsis to get me up to speed for sure. Let
yeah.
the people know where they can find you, though. I know I plugged your Twitter in the beginning, but if there's anything else you'd like to plug, please take the time.
Yeah, mostly Twitter. So I'm on Abdel underscore taco on Twitter. I also have a Substack. I've only wrote that math test piece, and then I got
People
burnt
need
out from
more, man.
college
That was a good
basketball.
feeling. You need more
Yeah,
of
man,
that.
that stuff was it. I wrote that. I spent like a month on that, and I was like, I don't want to watch any basketball for like months. So I'm gonna try to get something done soon. But yeah, you can follow me on there. Yeah. So no, I appreciate it, man. As always, I love talking draft and Hawks and basketball with you. So
Sure. Y'all go ahead and make sure you tap in with him on Twitter, add his Substack so he can be incentivized to keep dropping bangers like he did with the Modest Piece. I hope you all enjoyed. Make sure you like, comment, subscribe, add the episode, tell a friend, and I'll see you in the next one.
all right, take care, guys.